Just finishing up Flashboard.
Hello, everybody. How are y'all doing today? That's good. I like to hear that. So we're going to get things rolling here in just a few moments, but I just want to make a couple general announcements before we get started. First, regarding flash photography, if I could just have you turn off all the flashes on your cameras and cell phones, that'd be great. Speaking of cell phones, could you also have you put it on to vibrate or silent if we could? And if you do get a phone call, if you could just take it out in the hall, that'd be wonderful. Next, we do have a microphone here in the middle. And if you guys have questions and if they start taking questions there, please use the microphone. We love to hear your questions. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention about cameras too. We love you taking pictures too. We want you to take pictures, just without the flash. And then lastly, we are doing something new this year called FlipON.TV. Is it .com?
Just FlipON.TV.
Thank you. I've been saying this enough. I should know this by now. So just FlipON.TV. It's live streaming. It's really super cool. I was watching a couple last night. So if you get the chance, watch that tonight too. I'm going to get out of the way so these guys can get started. So have a great con, guys.
Now you have a souvenir.
Hey, welcome to Decoding Comicon. I'm really excited to be here. I have to say, as a sort of disclaimer, that it is my first Comicon ever, and I'm really thrilled. It's quite an experience. Some of you may or may not remember your first Comicon. My name's Buddy Levy. I've been asked to come up here by Joe Parrington as one of the co-hosts of a show called Brad Meltzer's Decoded, and the theme today is going to be, loosely, but we're flexible, Decoding Comicon. And I'll let these other esteemed gentlemen introduce themselves.
We'll start down here?
Sure.
My name is Phil Hester, and I'm a comic book writer and artist, and I've had long runs I'm drawing Green Arrow and Swamp Thing and Ant-Man, and I am currently the writer of Robert Kirkman's Invincible Universe, which is exactly what it sounds like. What else is happening in the Invincible Universe that doesn't have Invincible in it? I just recently drew an issue of Legends of the Dark Knight with Batman, and I can't say, the next panel will announce my new book, so I can't tell you, but so, sorry.
Hi, my name is Eric Trautman. I'm a comic book writer and longtime fan of this gentleman's work. I have had long runs on Dynamite Entertainment's iterations of Red Sonja. I relaunched Vampirella for them. Before that, I was a frequent collaborator on DC Comics books with, among other people, Greg Rucka on Action Comics, Checkmate. And recently had a Vertigo graphic novel called Shooters released, and my very first creator-owned digital comic was released on Friday at this very show. It's called Frost and is available, the teaser, for free on Comixology.
You know what we should do? We should say how many years we've been coming to comic book conventions too.
Yes, that one.
And I've been coming to them since I was 20 years old, so 26 years.
That's about the same for me, too. My first one was my freshman year of college. That was 1989. You can do the math, I guess. Longer than I want to know.
Hi, I'm Michael Robles. I am the community manager for Magic the Gathering. I work for Wizards of the Coast, and I spend a lot of time working at conventions. I tweet a lot, is what I like to say I do in my normal job. And I am a fan of conventions and also have a lot of behind-the-scenes experience working conventions. I've got a large background in video games, as well as working for Wizards of the Coast. I get to travel a lot and sort of be the man behind the scenes that sort of makes the booth experience greater. I've been doing conventions, I think I've been going conventions as a fan for about 15 years, and I've been working at conventions for probably about 10 years.
Everybody here is old.
Speak for yourself, Phil.
Not here. Oh, yeah, I guess that would be. My name is Kandrix Foong. I'm the event director and founder of the Calgary Expo, Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo. So Jim invited me up here because we're really, really close friends, and we do a lot of stuff in unison in terms of our events. So we've just had our 7th show. We're going to our 8th year. I've been going to various Comic-Cons for, I don't know, probably a good 15 years as well.
My name is Bob Schreck. I'm the rotting cadaver on the panel. Currently editor-in-chief at Legendary Comics, the same company of Legendary Pictures. I am a comic book slut. I have pretty much worked at every publisher that ever existed, and my first Comic-Con was Phil Suling in New York in 68, I think, 69. So I am truly a rotting piece of flesh. So.
Okay, well, hopefully he won't completely decompose before the end of the session. As I said, my name's Buddy Levy. I also write books which are narrative histories, and that's sort of how I got involved in television, working with Brad Meltzer's Decoded. Actually, I responded, I guess the only real sort of insight I'll give you today is that you always check your spam box. So people ask me sometimes, how'd you get on a television show? You know, you write these narrative history books, and I said, I was checking my spam box one day, and there was an email that said, you know, are you interested in being on a historical television reality show? And I thought, yes, I am, in fact. So I immediately opened that email, and that was in 2009. And then the next thing you knew, they had put this mug on national television, which goes to show they'll put just about anyone on TV. You know, just to start things off, I want to ask some sort of, we will certainly open the floor up to audience questions once we grind to a laborious halt down the road. But I wanted to open maybe with just a general question to these guys, because as I said, I sort of was swooped in here essentially from, you know, another world that's not a comic, pop culture, Comic-Con world. So my overarching question to start the day is sort of Comic-Cons, what the fuck? Okay, like what?
That's a familiar thing these days.
You know, and if we can start sort of general there, and then circle in closer. I mean, I guess I'm wondering, are you born knowing that you're a furry or a LARPer, or do you develop that?
I don't think we're going to talk about those conventions, the furry convention.
I just saw a few yesterday. So anyway, I guess you know, we're supposed to decode Comic-Cons, and there's a lot to them. You know, these things seem to have launched from virtual, small, tiny gatherings 40, 50 years ago to, you know, the San Diego one has something like 130,000 people. You know, they're actually trampling one another apparently to try to get to the main stages. And I'm just wondering, so what's the general attraction, and then more specifically, what keeps people coming year after year?
Are we going to work our way down again?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, for me, as both a fan and an aspiring professional, it was a way to sort of go and figure out how to do my job. When I was coming up and I knew I wanted to draw comics, it was before the internet existed, and there really wasn't any sort of guideline to how to go about being a cartoonist. But I knew I had some vague idea that there were these gatherings in big cities like Chicago and San Diego and New York, where other people like me got together and talked about if Thor could beat the Hulk, and you know, and if you wanted to draw Thor beating the Hulk, how to go about that. And you know, it was a place for me to take my artwork and show it to people who were making comics, and sort of, you know, find a place, you know, to build my path to my career. So it was, to me, it was always a very welcoming environment, and someplace, you know, I felt like I was with like-minded people. And I think that's sort of what brings everybody to a Comic-Con, no matter if you're a fan or a professional or just somebody who likes to observe all this. It's to see people who share interests, you know, gather together.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, to kind of tackle the broader question, like how did these things happen? Humans are tribal. We're all a particular tribe. It's no different than people who go to car shows because they're car enthusiasts. That's their tribe. Or if you're gathering 6 hours before the Sounders game for the tailgate because you're in that tribe. This is started as a fairly esoteric tribe merely because compared to other art forms, ours is, comics as a pop culture medium is very young. You know, sport goes back to the dawn of humanity, but like popular comics, that only dates back to the 30s and 40s. We've experienced astonishing growth as a tribe, and I think that's why you'll see the 130,000 people, you know, dogpiling into the San Diego Convention Center. You know, we all seek out like-minded people. That's just kind of the human experience, and this is just a particularly interesting outgrowth of it. One I find particularly positive and uplifting because essentially our business is playing in the imagination. You know, you hear a lot about how video games are ruining children and stuff, but I see a million kids at San Diego Comicon who wanna have these flights of fancy. So to me, that's what it's about. But
Sort of a kinship then.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, and building off that, I think for me, a lot of it has to do with, like, I've been playing Magic for 20 years, essentially since the game's inception, and you can come to this place where it's okay. You know, in high school, we had to go hide in a room to play Magic. We couldn't just play out in the open. I had to go hide in a room to read comics. You know, I was that weird kid who read comics, but there was a small little group of us that got there and read comics and played Magic. And so when you're here, I'm here at this convention essentially as a fan. Like, I'll do anything I can to not work this convention. If Magic the Gathering ever has a presence here, I will refuse to work. And be like, no, I'm here as a fan because I want to meet these artists. I want to meet the other people, and I want to meet those that are friends, you know, the friends that you've built. And because you get to feel comfortable here. Where else can you walk around as Finn and Princess Bubblegum and have other people want to stop and take photos with you? Where else can you walk around dressed as your favorite comic book hero and not be an outsider? My fiance tweeted the other day, I want to live in a world where cosplay is the norm and nobody looks at you weird. And I was like, yeah, I would love to live in that world. It's all about being in a place where you can feel comfortable all 3 days, 24 hours a day.
Excellent.
For me, I mean, I guess like most kids, there was a comic book store right by the junior high that I went to. So I walked in there one day, picked up some X-Men comics. I think it was like the Jim Lee X-Men #1 or something like that. And I got really, really hooked. And at the time, I was like very interested in art myself. So I figured, hey, maybe I could get a career in comics as a penciler. I think I may have actually given something to Bob when I was like really, really young. But I was a horrible artist, right?
I got a shot for that, actually. No, sorry.
Here's $10. But I mean, like, after a while, I started realizing that I was actually not strong enough as a penciler to actually make it in the industry, and I think that's something that was very important. I spent a lot of time in like business school, marketing, operations, that kind of thing, and eventually I would come back to, I guess, this entertainment world in a very different form of actually starting a convention. Which is a whole different animal in itself. So it's definitely pretty fun. And for me, I just like the entertainment aspect of it. And I like being able to have a lot of people like yourselves, when you're going to a Comic-Con, you're smiling because you're really, really happy about, this is so cool because I can see all this stuff that's here.
And we should say, if you like this con, you'd like the Calgary show too. It's a good. I've done both, and they're very similar in flavor, and they're both a blast.
And it has a great sexy logo too, I think. Really? Awesome. Oh, that's you. Right, you're the model. Excellent. And okay, I'll stop there. Awkward.
Awkward. Well, when I started in comic books, there was only one comic book. We had to share it amongst all of us in the country. Actually, there were no comic book stores. And a guy named Phil Suling out in New York, who was an older gentleman, maybe in his late 20s at the time, decided to put on a flea market. And people got together. But what was happening was all these great science fiction novels were already out and coming out, and Doubleday, the publisher, was taking these beautiful old Edgar Rice Burroughs books and repackaging them with Frank Frazetta art. And so there was this quiet little wave of weirdos that were all over the place, but they didn't know each other. And my paper boy, and also the other thing that, you know, myself and some older folks like Spielberg, we were all making Super 8 movies because they were cheap and available. And my first movie was Godzilla when I was 9 years old in the backyard in the snow. So we were all over. We didn't really know each other, that we existed, until suddenly, oh my goodness, oh, you're sick too? You have this disease? And it was all wrapped together with movies and science fiction and then comic books, and eventually, you know, me and Larry, my old paper boy, who connected, said, oh, there's this thing in the city, let's go and check it out. And then watched that grow, and then actually I began working in '76 for Creation Conventions, which had a very big show. It actually took over for Suling and blew Suling out of the water. And then they became a show that was all over the country. I did shows all over the country. And then it became multimedia, which meant Walter Koenig showed up. You know? So it's been interesting for me to watch it transform from purely comics to what it is now, which is all things weird, all things cool. So coming to these shows is a total joy. This show in particular, I have not done your show, I've heard good things. But this show in particular, there's your show, this show, the Baltimore convention, and the one in Heroes Con, which are, I think, the most fun for the pros because it's just more often than not more purely comic books than I like Lou Ferrigno. He's a nice guy. But, you know, it gets a little much when it's like, who are you? What TV show were you in? From what planet? You know, it gets a little diluted after a while. But those shows are great. And Comicon, you know, San Diego. I mean, no matter how unruly and how crazy it gets, it's the show. You know, it's an amazing show. So it's been a great journey, and you know, I wouldn't miss it for the world. All of them, you know, and I will be there soon. Promise.
So what I'm hearing is, I mean, a lot of you are echoing the same thing, which is that, you know, at certain point in your youth or childhood, even, you know, you were passionate about a kind of creativity that. And I mean, I've heard the word here, you know, closet and an illness so far, and you know, but there's also been this burgeoning, you know, explosion. I mean, it looks like there's a Comicon in, you know, in two in Canada, right? There's. We don't want to talk about Ottawa. You know, there's one in Portland, Rose City. There's the big one in San Diego. They're in Japan, right? I mean, this is a global phenomenon. Is this true?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up question here would be, you know, is this kind of exploding nerddom and things like, and I know I haven't learned all of the language yet, so I don't know which is offensive and which isn't. I know my cohort Brad Meltzer on the show, he calls himself a nerd and a geek proudly. So and again, you know, I remember those things as I was growing up being kind of. You know, disparaging remarks, and now there's a sort of, with the Big Bang Theory, you know, there's a kind of celebration. My question is that kind of celebration of nerd the beginning or the end of the world?
It's sort of like when your favorite band finally has a hit, right. You know, and you're like, I was into them with their first album, and we were sort of like, oh, we were nerds when it wasn't cool, and now it's cool. But I don't sense any bitterness on anybody's part. It's kind of cool to see everybody discover all the things we knew were cool for the last 40 or 50 years.
Oh, so there's a bit of pride in the fact that now they get it.
We were right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you who stuffed me in a locker in junior high, see, I was right. And I think that's an excellent observation that there is a sense of pride. I mean, you know, obviously there's a broad variety of topics available in all of these various media, but really all of it kind of stems from that early seed of here's a wonderful packaging of truth, justice, and the American way, and you do right and you'll prosper, and doing wrong is bad. And that's sort of the spine of this tribe, you know, in a lot of ways. And I think that's why you don't, you know, sure there are cliques and sure there are, you know, groups that don't get along. Like you made the joke about LARPers, for example. I mean, that's not uncommon, but at the end of the day, I think we all recognize we're all part of that same group. And so in terms of, you know, is it the beginning or the end of the world, I think we're kind of in our adolescence, frankly. And
that's
I can't
good news.
wait to see when we're adults. That's going to be really interesting.
Over the last few years, I mean, geek has just been on the rise. It's become more and more prominent in everything you do. You mentioned Big Bang Theory. I mean, last year, Magic sponsored the Warped Tour. Like, that is the combination that nobody saw coming, but everybody loved. There were bands that were like, oh, Magic's here, and started playing, and all of a sudden, Newfound Glory is tweeting every day about how much they love playing Magic the Gathering. And there are people on the internet going like, this is the weirdest thing ever. And there are people that necessarily wouldn't have come out outright and said, oh my God, I love Magic too, until they saw their heroes playing Magic. And the same thing goes when you see someone like Chris Cluey, the punter from the Minnesota Vikings, like, oh my God, I love Warhammer, I love Magic the Gathering. All of a sudden, all these Minnesota Viking fans are like, actually, I do too. I just never wanted to say anything because I'm afraid my other Minnesota Viking fan friends would kick my ass. And it's becoming this thing where it is becoming such a proud thing to be a geek that I completely agree. It's only going to continue to get bigger and better in the next few years at the rate it's going. This con is a perfect example. I've been coming to this con for 4 years now since I've moved up to Washington, and seeing how small it was 4 years ago to even last year, that this has doubled since last year, and I cannot wait to see where this show and the rest of this sort of like nerd world rising continues to get in the next couple years.
So I can say nerd then, is that?
Oh, yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Proudly, okay, proudly.
Well, I definitely echo what Michael's been saying, because it's definitely about passion, right? I mean, we're all very passionate about what it is that we like, and part of it is just inviting other people to acknowledge what it is that we're into, right? And I mean, I've got friends that go out, bought some prints like at this show, and they're like, "Oh, check it out!" And they're showing everybody what it is that they got. I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do to almost cross promote within our own genre of different things, right? When you buy a piece from one artist, you want to show it to the next friend and say, "Hey, this is really cool. You got to check this guy out." And it just keeps steamrolling from that point on. And we're definitely seeing a lot more of that. I mean, with the Big Bang Theory that came out, like that's great for us as an industry. Now we're kind of getting that, oh, well, we don't have to, like it's been mentioned, we don't have to hide away and stuff like that. It's actually pretty cool, right?
Yeah, also, though, there is a bit of a, the negative side is if you like go to San Diego or even here today, the amount of people that are actually doing something with their wallets and comics is not what it used to be. There's a lot of gawking and not buying. So the comic sales in general have not really, they're nowhere near what they were in the 80s. So there's more people, but there's less commerce in terms of the actual comics. Everybody's, oh, well, that's cool, that's really great, see you later. So we have to watch that. With Comicon in San Diego, in particular, Scott Morris, who's an amazing writer, illustrator, and a guy who works at Pixar as well. He was on the team for Brave. He has started this thing called Trickster, and I know the folks that run the show really don't appreciate it, but it's kind of like what Comic-Con used to be in 1985, where you can all get together and hang out and not have 1,000 trillion things going on. It's a small kind of community of people that really are there for the comics, So what they really need to do, and I've been saying this to them for a while, is they need to adopt kind of an Angoulême, which is a city in France that has an amazing show where, and they can do this because the government finances it, the entire city embraces the world of comics and genre fiction and everything. Then that's what Comic-Con needs to do in San Diego, is spread out, because it's just getting, you can't get a hamburger, So there's some negative to it, but the bottom line is, the more the merrier, so I hope.
Yeah, actually, the best quote I've heard about it, I'm an English professor as well, and one of my students was explaining to another student what Comic-Con was, and she said, "It's everything cool about everything that's cool." And I was like, well, that covers a hell of a lot of turf, doesn't it? Well, on to that note, I wanted to shift gears a little bit if we could, because the discussion about, paper comics and other kinds of media versus the sort of digital explosion we're having, I'm curious how that has affected the work that all of you do. As a writer of books, a couple years ago, we're hearing about the end of the book based on the fact that tablets and smartphones were arriving, and it hasn't really come to pass. It seems like maybe people are consuming as much or more content, but just in a different way. I am interested to know how that digital media has affected both the creation of content and also, since Bob brought it up, the consumption of it and the purchasing of it.
I want to go back to stone tablets. That's what I want. Give me the cave wall and leave me alone. Everything is a tool. Everything is, everybody starts streaming, the sky is falling. It's just another delivery system. It's just another way of reading comics or reading a book. Will it affect, look at the music industry. They fought against the electronic age and they lost. I've said this, I had a really crabby grandmother, and one day she told me in Bayonne, New Jersey, "I hate change." I was like, well, Grandma, change is gonna run you over. You better learn to accept it and embrace it. Otherwise, you will become an extinct being. So while I'm not super facile when it comes to all that stuff, I have a 29-year-old assistant who allows me to look like I know what I'm doing. It's the next wave, and we just have to surf it and make it happen, because people are still we love that cave wall. We love those stories. They're just going to be delivered in another way, that's all.
Well, I can say from organizing a Comic-Con perspective is it's a little bit tougher for us because now we have to spread our budget into multiple different things, right? So we bring out comic guys, web guys, TV guys, voice actors. I mean, we're very similar, like to Emerald City, where you've got a huge, mix of different guests. I think we brought out like 80, 90 different, professionals from all sorts of different industries. And at what point, does it stop? I mean, it's no different than competing for everybody's dollar, like for food, for example, right? It's like you go out there's so many different choices. What do you want? What do you feel like? So.
I think from a professional perspective, we've finally entered this period where the excitement has overtaken the fear, on the professional side. I mean, we're all worried about making a living doing this, and when your comics are available for free, sometimes before they come out in the comic shop, online, on pirate sites, you worry about making a living. But on the other hand, just throwing your work on the web is so liberating, and it's opening the doors to so many young cartoonists who would never, think about submitting their work to a publisher, that just the sheer number and the essence of creativity that you see from those new cartoonists is sort of washes away all my fears about, how are we all going to get rich off of this? I don't know if anybody's ever going to get rich off comics, again, but we are going to see beautiful artwork, and that's really what's important.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, I come to it from a somewhat unique perspective that in addition to being a guy who has worked mostly in print, my wife owns a brick and mortar comics retail store. And so there's a lot of concern in the retail landscape about the digital future when it comes to the comic shop as the gathering place, as the collective for people to go. And I couldn't be happier to be working digitally. Like I said, I just launched my first digital comic. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. It's a huge leap of faith. There's no upfront money, but it's incredibly democratizing. I have the same shelf space as DC Comics and Marvel Comics. It's the internet.
And no one can tell you what to make.
And nobody can tell me what to make. It is my own pure voice, and I am confident that, as he said, more creators are embracing it, because I don't have to worry about tying in with what's in Spider-Man that this other guy's writing, or Batman, or what have you. This is me. And ultimately, I'm a storyteller. It's up to me to make sure that I'm telling stories in a way that are accessible to the public, which means embracing all the tools at my disposal. And I find it incredibly interesting and thrilling, and it's a little terrifying, but...
But you also hope you can keep the brick and mortar shop open, right?
Oh, sure, and I actually have no fear in that score, because at the end of the day, there's still the people who want that issue of Spider-Man from 1968, or there's certain things that you can only do in print. This is somewhat inside baseball, and forgive me, but I think the concept, if you're new to comics, forgive me, the two-page spread, where you see the panel that goes all the way across both pages, I hate them digitally. Because
it doesn't look good.
You have to zoom in to read dialogue or what have you. So that effect really only works well in print. One of the biggest things that drives me nuts about the mainstream comics being just sort of ported over to Comixology or whatever is it should be optimized for that experience. And the simple way to do that, and it's a minor additional expenditure on the creation side, do two versions, the print version, which has the two-page spread, and then the one that's optimized for the web. The content can be the same. You'll just have to pay for an extra illustration and lettering and coloring job on that page.
So there isn't like a designated comic reader yet?
No,
like
and
Zinio
we're still,
or something.
Comixology seems to be leading the pack, but there are many competitors, and we haven't found our iTunes yet. I guess that's probably the best way of putting it.
Okay.
Comixology's close, but...
And so I think I'm obviously coming at it from a different perspective, because being in the gaming industry, the trading card game industry, is we're embracing that digital side. We have Magic the Gathering on iPad, on Steam. We have Magic the Gathering online where people can play. But at the same time, we're all about the community, and we're trying to build this community, be it on the internet. Especially my job as the community manager is I live connected to the internet. But I love playing Magic face-to-face with fans of the game. I love going to a convention and playing with fans face-to-face. And there's that difference in environment, essentially. I don't want to, as much as I can play online without wearing pants when I'm at home, I'd love to sit there and be able to play with people at a convention and hear their experiences and listen to them talk to me. And you just get that such different experience. So I'm looking at it where we're trying to capitalize on both. We want both. We welcome the digital age and where digital is going. At the same time, we are in no fear of losing our paper because we know that people are going to want to get together and play stuff. When they go to a brick and mortar store for Friday Night Magic, that's where they're going to play and that's where they're going to have those experiences.
And at the convention, you can wear any pants that you want to.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Apparently.
Totally.
My takeaway from that is the future is the pantsless convention. I'm very interested in that.
Well, since you brought that up, I did wonder. I mean, this is a little bit back to the opening theme, but my question is that the content of a lot of, and this isn't so much directed to comics, but just to a lot of the programming that we're seeing, Game of Thrones and other sorts of shows that comics used to be for kids, and so I guess I'm wondering are comics still for kids that never grew up, or is it that the content is becoming quite a bit more adult themed? Is that true or not true? Maybe we bust it over to Bob.
Well, not really. I mean, the 50s had EC comics, which kids really dug, but they were really sick and twisted, great stuff,
So it was already racy and adult. Okay.
I mean, crime, suspense, and blood and gore, a baseball game with body parts.
I missed that
wonderful
episode.
stuff. And that was Bill Gaines, who the Comics Code, meaning his competition, tried to crush, and then he created Mad Magazine, so screw them. So it's kind of always been there, because it was always being done by adults. Yes, in the earlier days, the late 30s and 40s, it was a little more squeaky clean. But if you look at Superman when he started, he's not the Superman we have now. He was a bit of a bully, Batman had guns, and then later on they had to clean up and, oh no, that didn't happen, never mind, So yeah, but now, of course, you have a much wider variety of subject matter and much more adult themes than you had before. Some are good and some are trash. It's just the way of the world, But yeah, it's my problem actually, not only with comics, but with film and television. There's so many, there's more access to the tools to make it. There's more delivery systems than ever. There's just more product. So everywhere I go, every show, hey, do you watch? I don't have the time to watch every TV show. It's really good. I know, but I'm going to die soon. I really want to watch Boardwalk Empire. I really do. And I've seen 3 episodes, and I might get to it before I die. But God, Sons of Anarchy. I mean, it's just one after another, which is great. It's really great. But you can only consume so much, Anyway, off on a rant, sorry.
I like it.
I totally agree. There's so much stuff out there, and it's really, really tough to keep up with everything that's going on, especially with respect to what I do is, we get fans that email us of like, hey, you should bring out this guy. You should bring out this guy. And it's like, I've never watched the show, so I have no idea if this is any good or not. And it becomes really, really tough to make that call because there is so much content on so many different levels. I think as a fan, though, it's really cool that you can find something for whatever taste that you have. I mean, when I was a kid, the first comic book that I really got into was, I'm sure, like Archie comics, like a lot of people, I think. But I can't tell you what the very first Archie comic I actually got was. But I can tell you the first real comic that I got that really got me into it. But yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we generally don't complain that there are too many good restaurants, right? I mean, it's a good thing.
Well, I think one of the things that you pointed out that it seems like things have gotten darker and more adult. That certainly was like any literary or music or dramatic movement of any kind. It kind of goes in cycles. It goes in waves. We had our really dark, grim, gritty period in the 90s and early 2000s. Then there's a period in the mid 2000s where it seemed like things got a little bit more optimistic, and you'd see books like Kurt Busiek's Astro City, which is a remarkably upbeat book. It's lovely. As a retailer, we've actually recently built for the first time a young adult section, and there's some amazing books for young readers that, as an adult, I find magnificent. Anything from Atomic Robo, which if you guys are not reading it, you have the opportunity for a free one on your badge, and you should immediately avail yourself of it. There's a book called Rust that Archaea publishes. It's lovely, and it's not just guys in masks punching guys in capes. I think what we're seeing is actually not a darkening, but a broadening of the available subject matter that we certainly didn't have when I was first starting reading comics, and it's thrilling. So it's a sign sort of more of our industries and our medium's adolescence rather than things are getting dark.
I think
more for
broadening.
everyone.
I think broadening is the right word. I mean, everyone here has seen all the Adventure Time comics at Boom. There are comics for everybody now. I mean, it's sort of like narrowcasting instead of broadcasting. Everybody can find their jam now. Everybody can, and I think that's great.
Is part of the challenge, finding out how to get that content to the specific audience? I mean, or do people find it on their own?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's sort of people spend millions of dollars trying to figure out, what people will like, and not knowing really, and nobody
They
really
throw
knows.
it out there.
Yeah, nobody knows what's going to work and what's not. But what's beautiful about comics still, compared to film or television or even legit book publishing, is that there's very little between you and your vision if you want to make a comic book. If you have a pen and a paper or a Cintiq or a scanner, you can have a comic book tomorrow if you want, and it's a really amazing thing, and it's sort of the lifeblood of comics.
Okay. I guess it would be appropriate, unless, I'm completely open to you guys throwing out some stuff, that I've certainly overlooked, but we probably have time to open things up to the audience if that seems like a way to roll.
Yeah, sure. Here we go.
And if my daughter doesn't come up and ask a question, then she'll be penalized in some way.
Hi, I'm Topher. I'm a nerd.
Hi, Topher.
I've been going to conventions for 30 years. So I had a question for Buddy, and I was just wondering, I'm a huge fan of Decoded, but as an active Freemason, why do you blame us for everything?
The Freemasons take the heat for everything, and I will tell you, Topher, that the Illuminati is a close second, but they're just an easy scapegoat, and I will tell you that in the first episode that we did there at we were trying to find out what happened to the White House Cornerstone, and we went to the Scottish Rites House of Freemasons in D.C. and hung out with some of these keepers of the archives of the, and you know what? They were like scholars who are they're not trying to, as Brad Meltzer likes to say, murder your children or anything. They're like the nicest people I've ever met. They're just an absolutely easy scapegoat.
Hello, I'm Ben. I'm also a nerd.
Welcome, Ben.
So one of my favorite parts of the con is coming and having that starstruck moment where you get to meet the people that actually make the things that you love. And I'm just curious, if you guys could share your most amazing starstruck moment that you've had at a con.
Do we have to pick just one?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
there's
feel free
a
to go
lot.
into it as much as you like.
I have a great one. Right when I was starting out, and it was during a time called the Black and White Explosion of comic books. This is when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started, and then pretty much anybody with a credit card decided they were a comic book publisher. And there were black and white comic books everywhere. And there was a panel in San Diego that could have been called "These Black and White Comics, Should We Be Allowing Them?" And it was sort of the Illuminati of comics on the panel, saying, "Oh, this is a passing phase. This stuff's never going to last. It's never going to fly." And Will Eisner, legendary comic book creator of the Spirit, sort of the godfather of comics, tapped the mic and turned to the panel and said, "That's a hell of a way to talk about the people you're going to be working with for the next 20 years." And I was one of those people, and I saw this halo appear around him, and I was so excited. And then I went to the restroom, and I was doing my business at the urinal, and I turned around, and Will Eisner was peeing next to me. I thought, this is it. I'm there. I made it. I peed next to Will Eisner.
Oh my God, he urinates too.
Yeah,
They're real people. Yeah.
way better than I do.
I have that experience every show. There's not a show that goes by that I don't get to interact with somebody whose work I've respected and admired and aspired to for years. I'm sitting here watching the guy who drew my favorite Green Arrow arcs ever drawing Green Arrow, and I haven't seen that since he stopped drawing Green Arrow. I'm having that moment right now.
I feel bad for you.
Yeah, I'll live. Will Eisner hugging my wife at the Eisner Awards banquet. Our store had been nominated for Spirit Retailer Retailer Award, and whether we won or lost, we didn't care because Will Eisner came over and hung out with me and my wife, and that was.
Did she pee with him?
Honey.
Sword fights.
Wow. I've got two. One related directly to Comic-Con, and one. So last year I mentioned Magic the Gathering sponsored the Warped Tour, and they had to stop here in Washington. And Warped Tour was like, "Do you want free tickets?" And I was like, "Yes." Like, of course. One of my favorite bands in high school, New Found Glory, was there, and they're playing Magic. So I get to the Warped Tour, and I'm hanging out, I'm having a blast. It's me and my fiance, the guy that organized the sponsorship, and New Found Glory's like, "Hey, do you guys want to come play Magic on our tour bus?" And like, I was, yeah, oh yes, please, oh my God, because I got to play Magic with the band I listened to I played the game that I played in high school with the band I listened to in high school, and it's just this weird, massive turnaround that working for the company I work for, and they were geeking out on us. They were like, "Oh my God, you make this game's amazing." I was like, "Oh my God, I loved you in high school." Like, it's so weird. Oh yeah, no, my fiance stomped them. It was amazing. Like, she crushed them. Oh yeah, and then they invited us like on stage to watch their set, and I was just like, I lost it. I lost my shit. This year we've got some of Magic's artists from the last 20 years, and they're putting together this book, and so we go, and I'm walking around, I was checking out that awesome gallery they have. I'm seeing some of my old favorite artwork, and then I'm talking to Pete Ventners, and he's drawn some of the most amazing Magic art. And I was like taking my badge off. I was like, "I'm done. I'm not pro. I'm fanboying out right now." And he's talking my ear off, and I'm just staring at him. Realize I haven't spoken in like 2 minutes. I'm just staring at him. And he's like, "Did you want something?" I was like, "Can you sign my card, please?" And he signed the card, and I walked off. And I was like, "Oh my God, honey, look." And she's all business type. She's like, "I know. I email him every day." I'm like, "I hate you." He's so cool. But those, I mean, it's same thing. Like every con, there's something that happens. It's amazing.
I think for me, it was actually meeting my favorite penciler, which is Wills Portasio. I met him as a kid. I also showed him some artwork as I was trying to get into being a penciler. But years later, when I started running the Comic-Con, I was like, I wonder if I could invite him out. And then he came out to the show, and then we ended up becoming a little bit closer and stuff like that. So I think that that's a really heartwarming type of thing when you realize the people that you look up to are just people, and you can actually carry out like a regular conversation about anything. So that for me was that.
I was pretty lucky. I've gotten to meet so many people that I literally would just pinch myself and go, "Criminy, I can't believe I just did that." Jack Kirby, multiple times, so much so that I actually worked with him on a small project. Just all these Stanley, all these great people. But my one favorite story is when I was working at Creation, they gave me a show to run that I could book the guests. And all the major B-level Star Trek guests were missing. I couldn't get them. But I got B.B. Besh, Kirk's wife in The Wrath of Khan. But I brought out Harlan Ellison, who was already a friend at that point, which, again, when I first met him, was like, you know. But I got to bring Ray Harryhausen to his first his first show in the States. And, long hair. I pick him up at the airport. "Hey, how you doing, bro?" And he's like, "Oh, my God, I'm going to get killed in the car with this kid." So he brings me up to his hotel room, and he's like, "I'm about to leave because I want to give him his space." He goes, "But Bob, wouldn't you like to see Guanji?" Like, "Huh? Would you like to hold Guanji?" Bye. I almost ran out of the room with Guanji. But at the show, while he was showing his puppetoons that he did with George Pal way back when he was much younger, and you couldn't see them back then. It was him with a suit with 16 millimeter. I'm in the back of the room, and I'm a proud papa. It's like, this is my guest. This is great. And standing next to me is this guy who had been to our shows but never let us know he was there. But I suddenly recognized him, and I went, "Frank?" It was Frank Miller. What are you doing here? And he looks at me. Oh, first I go, Bob Schreck. He goes, I know who you are. Like, Christ, that was it. I almost had to go in the dry cleaners. But I go, what are you doing here? He goes, shut up. Because he wanted, so it was like this confluence of these two great people at the same time. So, yeah, that's the best thing about all these shows is you can get to walk up and go, God, you're amazing. And Theodore Sturgeon, another one that I finally get to meet, one of the great science fiction writers of all time. It's amazing.
We could actually fill the rest of this panel telling stories about Bob facilitating those moments for the rest of us. Because I've got like 10 stories of Bob introducing me to my heroes, who later turned into friends.
So hang out with Bob. Is
you get to know Bob.
Myers Rum and Cokes. That's it, the whole night.
Well, mine was yesterday because I only started yesterday, and they brought me backstage and said, here's Gillian Anderson, now go interview her in front of 2,000 people. So that's what I did. Was anyone there? Okay. Hey, thanks for coming.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you all for being here. And my question for you guys is, what inspired you? What an inspirational moment that inspired you to make this your career?
Well, I read an issue. I can really put a fine point on it. I read an issue of Iron Man that ended in a cliffhanger. Tony Stark got thrown off the helicarrier without his armor on, but he had it in his briefcase, and he had to put it on before he hit the ground. And that was the cliffhanger, and I could not wait for the issue to come out. And I'd always loved to write, and I always loved to draw, and I was about 10 or 11 years old. I decided to make up my own ending to that comic. And I drew my conclusion, and then it dawned on me that, oh, all these names at the front of the comic, these are people that do this for a living, and maybe I can be one of those people. And I've been on that track since I was, like I said, 11 years old.
That's interesting. We have a similar track. When I was about 9 years old, my family went on a family vacation, and we didn't normally do that. My parents are serial collectors of hobbies, so normally a vacation for them was to just not go to work and stay home and do whatever the new hobby du jour was. This is a rare case where we went on an actual road trip, and we briefly ended up in Washington, D.C. and got to see the Smithsonian. And because I had been particularly well-behaved in the train, they allowed me to purchase some stuff from the Smithsonian gift shop, including a book called The Smithsonian Book of Comic Book Comics.
Oh, that's a great book.
I'd always liked comics, but when you're 6, 7, it's like, there's just some machine somewhere that spits out a story. You don't think of human beings crafting these. And the unique thing about the Smithsonian Book of Comic Book Comics, to my experience at that point, it was full of great stuff. First appearance of Batman, first appearance of Superman, and early Shazam, all sorts of my first exposure to the EC comics that we had referred to earlier. But every section had an essay in front of it that talked about the creators, and that was sort of the aha moment for me. It was like, it was this doubly, it was a double shock. First of, human beings make these, and then the moment of, I could make these. That could be my job, which is why I maintain that book is possibly the most subversive book ever written. And after that, the die was cast. I just wrote constantly, and I've been a working writer since I was about 14. I made my first sale at 14 and just never stopped because of that book and that horrible family vacation.
Realizing that I can turn my passions and hobbies into a career was probably when it dawned on me. I played video games since I was 8 years old. I played Magic for 20 years, and obviously I have a different perspective from these guys, but for me, I worked in video games. I tested video games for a long time, and then I went and did the 9-to-5 job. I was like, this is the worst job I've ever had. It was just the regular 9-to-5. So when I started getting back into video games and moved up to here, I was like, oh, Wizards of the Coast is up here. I used to play the crap out of Magic. They have a job opening. I'm going to do everything I can to try and work there. And it's just having that passion. We all do what we do because we are passionate about our hobbies and our interests. And so, like, that's really what dawned on me. There wasn't one particular aha moment. It was always knowing that I wanted to do whatever I was interested in and want to continue to keep doing that.
So for me, it's kind of like two parts. Adam Hughes said yes for me. When I started thinking about maybe putting together a show, I was asked to talk to a couple different artists, and Adam Hughes actually said yes to coming out to our first year, which he's never come out to, oddly enough, until this year. He's coming out to our show. And that was really the basis of like, oh, great, here's this great comic book artist that we can build our show around. The other part of it is just like, you know, I've mentioned a few times about trying to get into drawing comics. Well, I wasn't really good, so I think the way that I found my way into this industry is creating the Comicon, because that's almost like my canvas, right? So this is how I create or let out my creativity by doing the convention end of things, as opposed to trying to draw.
Yeah, as a kid, like I said, I made movies and scared my neighbors. Drew all the time and took those, you know, draw Zippy the Turtle things, and I was pretty good at it, but I eventually realized I hit a wall. I wasn't really going to go much further. But I had a huge comic book. My bedroom was just paper, you know, vinyl and paper ready to explode, and it did when I was 19 and a half. The house burnt down, and I lost everything. And that night, sticking your head through the screen window and screaming into the abyss, and the abyss going, you know, kind of was cathartic. I was a printer at the time. I was working in a print shop. And I just woke up and said, gosh, I'm wasting my life away. This is not what I love. I hate this. And my dad was kind of a dour, he was a cop. And he'd always call the three sons his three leeches, which is really nice. And so I had this really bad example of how not to live your life. I never told them that. Oh, you know, I used you as an example. I just flipped it. But that fire woke me up, and I said, whatever I do from here on out, even if it's being a bum, I'm going to be a happy bum. And I started a band, and then the next thing I knew, I was working at Creation, and the next thing I know, I became a comic book slut. So it all worked out, no complaints.
Fire away.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm nervous.
It's okay.
You're doing great. Hey, let's give her a hand. Hey.
I do still have a
You're doing
question.
great.
I do still have a question. It's my first time at the Comicon ever. I mean, ever. I've never been to a Comicon besides this.
You picked a great one.
Yeah.
You think?
We've already talked about the pantless
Because we're
convention.
picturing you with no underwear or clothes on. Or what is it?
But you should have heard.
That came out poorly. Can I have a take back there?
You think?
Is that fair to take that back?
But you should have seen all the jokes that I got with my Angry Birds hat. Angry Birds Star Wars. Angry Birds meets Power Rangers too.
You're doing great, seriously.
Yeah. Okay, so like, at your first Comic-Con ever, like, what was the best thing that ever happened to you?
Well, I think we covered the most awesome moments. I think for me, the most important thing that ever, at my first Comic-Con, was being able to show my artwork to professional comic book editors and other artists and get their feedback and sort of figure out what I needed to do as an artist. That was really important to me because, at least when I was a kid, you were sort of like working in a vacuum. You didn't know I didn't even know what size comic book pages were. So it was important for me to get out and actually show my work to people that could tell me. And for me, that was the most exciting part. And then also being able to buy comics and just, you know, argue about Green Lantern. That was all cool. But, you know, showing my work was important.
And like, what's your favorite card game?
Strip
Texas
poker.
Hold'em?
Yeah, poker.
My favorite's Pokemon.
To switch gears a little to answer Brandy's question, Brianne's question, excuse me. My first show as just going to one, not as a pro, it was before I was working in comics, was the Albany Comic Convention in Albany, New York. I have a friend whose birthday is December 24th, so he gets hosed on his birthday every year. World's biggest Spider-Man fan. So our goal was to get him an actual piece of comic art of Spider-Man from a comics professional, thinking, oh, that's going to cost like maybe 30 or 40 bucks because we're a bunch of broke college kids. And it cost considerably more. We learned very quickly. So we just went from Comics Pro to Comics Pro and big names, Eastman and Laird at their height, the guys who made Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I finally get to this guy at the end of the row, and we're completely demoralized. And we explained our plight and what we were looking for. How much is it going to cost? And he said, I haven't eaten all day. Can you get me a sandwich? And so we took our meager earnings, put them all together, ran to the nearest Burger King, loaded him up with quarter pounders and fries and shakes, everything we could give him. And he did this beautiful 11 by 17 full color inked lettered page of Spider-Man wishing my friend Joe a happy birthday. That gentleman is Greg Capullo. He draws Batman now. You know, and that's why I love conventions.
And to this day, comics is still a sandwich-based economy.
Pizza also acceptable.
So my very first Comic-Con, the best experience was actually feeling at home and realizing that this is where I want to spend my time in the future. I love working conventions, and I love being a part of them. Like I said earlier, I love being at this convention just as a fan, and when I am at PAX representing Magic, it is one of the greatest feelings in the world. And I remember my very first Comic-Con being there and just realizing I was home.
We do have time for this one last question. Thanks.
Okay, so my question is, with the popularity of movies like The Avengers and the Dark Knight series, do you guys feel like comics have been popularized now, or is it still something that, you know, geeky guys like myself sit in their bedrooms and flip through comic books?
Well, the cool thing about it is you can take however much of it as you want. You know, to the casual fan, they can go to the Avengers movie or they can watch Star Trek on television. But if you find yourself getting into it, you can get deeper and deeper until, like I said, you're arguing about Green Lantern with strangers. So that's what's great about comics.
That's the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, hey, thanks for coming. Did we decode Comicon? It's been a great pleasure for me. I really appreciate it. Thanks to these gentlemen,
Thank you.
Thank you so
buddy.
much.